Hi everybody, I'm Larry O'Brien. I'm Vice President of Research at ARC Advisory Group, and we are here live at the 2026 ARC Industry Forum in Orlando. I'm here today with Brandon Park. Hi Brandon, how are you today?
Good, Larry.
Good.
Great to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you too. So you're with a relatively new company in the industrial cybersecurity space called Galvanick. And very interested to find out more about what you're doing in your company, but first I'd like to talk about you specifically. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? As I understand it, you went from building industrial cybersecurity programs at places like Merck and Bechtel to leading global industry security at Amazon. And what did that journey teach you about what works and what breaks and doesn't work in OT security?
Yeah, Larry, my background started as a controls and automation engineer in the pharmaceutical space. So I started at Merck, supporting various aspects of production, live viral vaccine manufacturing, sterile supply, packaging, and everything that was at that campus. I was just kind of understanding more of how the systems were running and being maintained. Started kind of going down the rabbit hole more on the networking side. And that's how I started pivoting more towards the security space. From there was at Bechtel supporting this was the Bechtel's federal division, so we were supporting DoD and DOE projects. They were tasked with implementing cybersecurity measures for the various facilities and project sites that they had. Mm-hmm. And then more recently was Amazon's first OT cybersecurity hire. There was a new team that was spun up reporting to the CISO that was responsible for all of Amazon's global fulfillment, so the distribution centers, the warehouses, globally. We had a very small team when we started, but very, very strong mission. Say some of the big things that have influenced how I kind of look at things, one, really coming from the process and the engineering side of the house, really understanding how the operations are running, but also seeing at various times when maybe more the IT enterprise was trying to work, with the production side, and sometimes there'd be conflicts. Kind of understanding, a lot of the nuances as to the why, understanding what was tried, what didn't work, what did work. So that I would say shaped a lot of kind of my perspective, and then especially flipping over to Amazon where the scale was much bigger, right? Challenging the conventional norms of when I have this scenario, I'm going to implement this countermeasure or another countermeasure. But how do you do things at scale without drastically increasing headcount, fronting some sort of proxy or appliance device in front of all these systems? It really got us to look at the core basics of how the systems are operating and what we could do that would scale. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think if you have a limited team like that, right, you sort of have to think out of the box and creatively to figure out how to get these things done. As somebody, as an analyst at ARC that covers the industrial and OT cybersecurity marketplace, it's a crowded market, right? We have a lot of vendors out there, a lot of consolidation going on. The vendors all claim visibility and threat detection. And what's different about Galvanick? What does Galvanick do differently? And why should that interest the operators and the end users out there?
Yeah, there's a lot of different tools in the space. I'd say kind of looking at solving different problems, but more of the monitoring and the threat detection side of the house. Very familiar with some of the big names and the players. Deployed them in production environments in past lives to really understand the nuance. I would say the question I would frame it as, if I had a puzzle that had 10 pieces and I only gave you one piece of the puzzle, would you definitively know what that image of the puzzle is? Right? It's really hard when you only have one type of information. So I'd say our approach is fundamentally different in the sense that we understand these environments have different types of data, different data sources, different collection methods. We want to really understand more holistically the view of the environment, not just looking at a single source of information. So we've kind of structured our capabilities in a way to be able to absorb the different types of information, stitch those together, and essentially give you more puzzle pieces so you have a better idea of what that actual image is, not just being forced to use that one corner piece.
Yeah, that's a good comment. And that's one of the things I've tried to bring out too, is a holistic view of everything, right? We talk a lot about this IIoT and their different domains, and I realize they have different requirements and everything, but you really do need that holistic view. So let's talk about, many organizations already have network monitoring tools or asset inventory solutions in place, right? We have a lot of these point solutions that are out there. But what would you tell a security leader who feels like they have already checked the OT security box, if you will?
Yeah, great question. I would actually maybe counter and say, based on the conversations we're having across the different customer bases, more often than not, there aren't as many organizations that have some existing investment already in the space. So I'd say it's actually much smaller. Now the companies that do, they've got pretty robust programs around those. But I'd say the larger market hasn't previously made a lot of investment in this space. So there's more opportunity there. Now for folks that already have some systems and they're happy with it, look, if they're happy with it, I'm not going to necessarily tell them to do something different. But where they've made some previous investment, they realize they have to drastically staff to support these systems. They're still trying to onboard other tools to make sense of it. This is a capability that we deploy in a matter of hours. We've had one organization that told us like, I've spent, this is a global CISO for a consumer goods company, and we're talking with them, and it's like, I've already done a lot of this stuff. And I was like, okay, just kind of walk us through, what was the timelines and how did you resource? We're like, teams had endless funding. This is a multi-year endeavor, and over the course of 9 years, they had a capability that they were comfortable with. Like, how many organizations have the time and the resources to be able to dedicate millions of dollars over the course of a decade to have a comparable, capability? And for us, like, you get it within a matter of hours. So it's like the speed to the deployment, the speed to value that is, really important for us.
Very good. So for the operators and security leaders out there in our audience who are just starting their OT cybersecurity journey, what pieces of advice would you give them about how to evaluate vendors and avoid some of the common mistakes?
Being a former asset owner myself and kind of being on the other side, I say there's a lot of work that there's a lot of inherent trust that you're essentially giving them, right? You're looking at your vendor or partner as a subject matter expert. But there are also times where claims can be made that may be a little overblown, overstated. So you really need to understand, I would say question, what types of testing have you guys done? How do you validate? How do you ensure that things are working the way you'd expect? I was fortunate, in a previous life where I was able to, deploy a lot of solutions in actual production environments and have rigorous testing and really kicking the tires to kind of vet those out. But I understand that was a luxury compared to the norm. But just have really honest conversations and not necessarily take everything at face value. That's
good advice. So last point, Galvanick's a new company. Where can people go to find out more about your company?
Yeah, our primary website, galvanick.com. Galvanick with a CK. There's another, that's the best place to start.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Brandon. So again, my name's Larry O'Brien, Vice President of Research, and we are here at the ARC 2026 Industry Forum in Orlando, and we've been talking to Brandon Park of Galvanick. Thanks again, Brandon, and we hope to see you here next year.
Yeah, Larry, thanks for your time today. I appreciate this.
Thank you.